Daylight breaks over western Iraq as a vehicle barrels down the causeway of the Al-Qadisiyah Dam toward a Ranger position. 50 caliber rounds stop it cold. 5 armed guards are killed immediately. 9 more spill out and take cover behind the concrete railings. For the next hour, American Rangers and Iraqi defenders trade fire across one of the most strategically important structures in the country. This is the 1st of April, 2003, and this is the fight for Haditha Dam. It is easy, looking back, to think of the invasion of Iraq as a rush of armor toward Baghdad, tanks and Bradleys crossing open desert, while the outcome was already decided. That is not the story at the Al-Qadisiyah Dam, known to American planners as Haditha Dam. Here, a single Ranger company, reinforced by a platoon from C Company, fought for a full week to prevent a catastrophe that had nothing to do with capturing ground and everything to do with keeping the reservoir behind the dam exactly where it was. This is the story of the dam itself, in the first days of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and the Rangers who held it. The stakes were never subtle. Haditha Dam sat astride the Euphrates River, a 6-mile-long dam complex whose concrete structure rose more than 15 stories. If Saddam Hussein's forces destroyed it, the resulting flood would impede the 3rd Infantry Division's advance through the Karbala Pass on its way to Baghdad. It would also devastate population centers and agricultural land across the floodplain, creating an environmental and humanitarian disaster alongside the military one. Whoever held the dam controlled whether the Euphrates remained a river or became a weapon. The men tasked with settling that question belonged to B Company, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, commanded by Captain David Doyle. They arrived at H1, a remote and dust-choked airfield in west-central Iraq, on the 29th of March, linking up with the rest of 3rd Ranger Battalion, which had parachuted into the country 5 days earlier. There was no time for a reunion. Almost immediately, the newly arrived Rangers were ordered to move toward Objective Links, the code name for Haditha Dam. The original concept of the operation was for 3rd Battalion to serve as a diversion, pulling Iraqi attention away from the dam, so that other special operations elements could slip in and secure it. Plans like that rarely survive contact with reality, and this one was about to change completely. On the 30th of March, Captain Doyle led B Company and an attached section of heavy mortars from H1 toward a remote desert landing strip, to refuel before settling into what the Rangers called a remain-over-day position, a place to rest and gather intelligence before the next push. At the landing strip, the mission started to grow. A platoon from C Company joined the formation, along with elements from the battalion's Tactical Operations Center, an Air Force enlisted terminal attack controller to coordinate airstrikes, a physician assistant, the battalion command sergeant major, and the battalion executive officer. By the time everyone was fueled and positioned, the assault force numbered 17 vehicles and 140 Rangers, and they pushed out into a moonless night. Those 140 Rangers and 17 vehicles formed the initial assault force, not the complete American force for every day that followed. They were the tip of the spear that would seize the complex in the opening hours. The longer defense of the dam would also depend on reinforcements, Army Special Operations Aviation, Air Force attack aircraft, and the ability to move wounded men out under fire. Intelligence expected at least a platoon defending the dam itself, with a mechanized company to the south near Haditha village. The Rangers reached their remain-over-day site as the sun came up on the 31st, and while they gathered what intelligence they could on enemy positions and strength, Captain Doyle received word from the battalion executive officer that changed everything. At 2 in the afternoon, B Company had received orders, transmitted digitally, to seize Haditha Dam outright and prevent its destruction. This was no longer a supporting effort. It was the main event. Doyle gathered his first sergeant, the battalion executive officer, and his fire support non-commissioned officer, and built a plan on the hood of his vehicle, using his Ranger handbook and whatever imagery they had available. Platoon leaders took notes as fast as he could give them. The Rangers expected the dam to be defended by at least a platoon of Iraqi troops on site, with a mechanized company positioned to the south near Haditha village, ready to reinforce. Doyle laid out a 3-part assault. 2nd Platoon would lead the main effort, seizing a foothold on the dam itself and clearing the interior of the massive complex. 1st Platoon would take the high ground west of the dam, providing overwatch and blocking positions, and between them, a platoon from C Company would clear Objective Cobalt, the power station and transformer yard south of the main structure. Doyle believed the whole operation could be wrapped up in under 24 hours. He had no idea it would stretch into a week. Believing they had only 2 hours to prepare, the Rangers scrambled to disseminate the plan down to squad level. In the middle of the preparation, a pair of AH-6 Little Bird attack helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment arrived to provide aerial escort and close air support. Doyle briefed the pilots, adjusted his fire support plan, and after several coordination delays, the convoy finally moved out at 10:40 at night, 2 hours behind schedule. First Lieutenant Graham White took point, and the column pushed northeast through terrain that grew steadily more hostile, barren desert giving way to scrub-covered hills and dry gravel stream beds. At one point the convoy lost its helicopter escort entirely, when a ground vehicle's broken gearbox slowed the column enough that the little birds had to peel off and refuel. A replacement flight arrived to provide reconnaissance, and the Rangers pressed on, reaching a final barrier and racing to reach the dam before daylight exposed them. White and his driver guided the formation through a narrow gap in a breached fence, onto a raised gravel road that dropped 30 feet on either side, hunting for the route that would take them to the objective. Then it appeared exactly where it was supposed to, the gravel road, and 200 meters beyond it, the asphalt road leading straight to the dam. The Rangers closed ranks between vehicles and accelerated to 60 kilometers an hour, racing the sunrise toward a structure that rose more than 15 stories out of the desert floor, its 6 spillways and towering entrance gates now visible against the sky. The convoy split apart as planned, each platoon peeling off toward its assigned objective. Second platoon divided into 2 elements. Lieutenant White led one section toward the western administrative tower, while his platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Jeffrey Duncan, took the other element east across the causeway. Rangers in Duncan's group dismounted near the western entrance and spotted 2 armed Iraqi guards through night vision. Rather than opening fire, the Rangers called out commands in Arabic and flex-cuffed both men to a handrail. Moments later, as the section moved into blocking positions, gunfire erupted. A single vehicle carrying 14 armed Iraqi guards charged a second platoon squad crossing the dam. Hundreds of 50 caliber rounds slammed into the truck and stopped it, though 9 of the occupants survived and pulled the Rangers into an hour-long firefight from behind cover. Elsewhere on the dam, Lieutenant White was searching for an entry point into the administrative building when a Ranger shouted a warning that someone had a weapon. A staff sergeant spotted a man diving beneath a piece of sheet metal, glimpsed the barrel of a rifle and fired, registering the operation's first enemy kill. Shortly after, 2 more Rangers discovered 3 armed and disoriented guards, hiding in what looked like an empty shack, and they too were dealt with. Having made contact, the Rangers pushed forward and finally found a door into the administrative building. Using a hooligan tool, a combination axe and crowbar also used by emergency personnel, they pried open the heavy metal entrance and began the long grinding work of clearing the structure floor by floor. It was a bigger job than anyone anticipated. 9 floors, 10 offices each, a control room, locked bathrooms and balconies, all falling to a section of roughly 20 Rangers. They kicked in doors, blew locks, and stacked anything of intelligence value into the hallways as they went. On the 6th floor, exhausted and grinding through room after room, they made a discovery that snapped everyone back to full alert. 25 startled civilian dam workers, sheltering inside. The Rangers separated them, photographed each man, and restrained them temporarily, and the senior employee among them actually helped speed up the search by guiding a squad to locations where demolitions might be hidden. After 4 hours of searching, Lieutenant White radioed that the building was clear, leaving a small detail to guard the workers. The rest of his Rangers moved back to the surface and found, as the historical account put it, that outside all hell had broken loose. Sergeant First Class Duncan's element saw comparatively little action until daylight broke. Then a sniper spotted Iraqi fighters preparing to fire rocket-propelled grenades from the far side of the river, nearly 1,000 meters away. One man stood beside what looked like a propane tank, with 2 others positioned behind it. Cleared to engage, the Ranger sniper fired a single round that struck the first man, passed through his body, and detonated the tank, killing the other 2 instantly. Soon after, Duncan's element was ordered to push across and secure the eastern side of the dam. A quarter of the way across, another vehicle came racing toward them. 50 caliber fire tore into it, killing 5 of the armed guards inside instantly. 9 more piled out and took cover behind the dam's concrete railings, triggering another hour-long firefight that ended with several guards killed or wounded and 5 taken prisoner. In the middle of that fight, 2 wounded Iraqis tried to escape down the dam's steep embankment. Rather than leave them to die, the battalion command Sergeant Major and Sergeant First Class Duncan made the call to go get them. With clearance from Captain Doyle, the 2 men sprinted down the slope under direct anti-aircraft artillery fire coming from the south, found the wounded guards, administered first aid, and carried them back up to the top of the dam while still under fire. Both men were later awarded the Silver Star for that action. To the south, the C Company platoon assigned to Objective Cobalt found itself facing a target more complicated than expected. Unable to reach the power station and transformer yard from the top of the dam, the Rangers reversed course and threaded back through 1st Platoon's blocking position, then descended a steep embankment with 3 vehicles and 27 men. What awaited them included an anti-aircraft artillery training academy that no one's intelligence had flagged beforehand. In the pre-dawn dark, the Rangers spotted 3 armed men standing near a small building. Experience from Afghanistan had taught them that an armed man wasn't automatically a combatant, since everyone in these environments carried weapons. But when the Iraqis opened fire on the lead vehicle and dove into a bunker, any ambiguity vanished. A grenade thrown by a Ranger team leader lit up the position and forced a brief pullback to regroup. The platoon commander adjusted on the fly, sending one squad to suppress the defenders, while another flanked in near the gatehouse. An Iraqi soldier peeking around the corner of the gatehouse was quickly captured. Rangers pulling rear security then discovered a bunker holding 5 armed Iraqis with rocket-propelled grenade launchers, who simply sat and stared at their captors, offering no resistance. They were flex-cuffed, disarmed, and left in place, since the platoon lacked the manpower to spare a guard detail. Not everything went cleanly. A vehicle called forward from the dam took a wrong turn and drove straight into the developed grounds of the Anti-Aircraft Academy. Rocket-propelled grenade and small arms fire crisscrossed the hood almost instantly. One round struck a specialist's foot and punched through the vehicle's oil filter. As the truck fled the kill zone, another round struck a machine gunner square in his body armor, knocking him backward, but leaving him unhurt. The driver floored it and drove the vehicle out on 4 flat tires, trailing oil the entire way, until it finally died just short of 1st Platoon's position. Rangers pushed it the last 50 meters to safety by hand. The wounded specialist escaped with nothing worse than a gunshot wound to his toe. 1st Platoon, meanwhile, had established blocking positions across the road leading into the dam complex, and while clearing what they believed were 2 buildings, discovered 12 more that appeared nowhere on their maps. One of them stocked with training materials for the anti-aircraft school, sand tables depicting Western Iraq, posters of Iraqi weapon systems, and photographs of artillery pieces. When the fighting to the south erupted around the wounded specialist and his gunner, the platoon sergeant called for reinforcement, repositioned vehicles, and answered enemy fire with grenade launchers and heavy weapons of his own, before calling in the little birds again. After 30 intense minutes, the helicopters had silenced the enemy mortar positions, and the attack broke. By midday on the 1st of April, Captain Doyle judged that his Rangers controlled the dam. He used the daylight to reposition his forces, pulling the C Company platoon back to sit between his own 2 platoons, releasing the Little Bird crews, who had stayed on station well past the safety of darkness. 2nd Platoon fortified its positions on the east side. C Company's platoon consolidated prisoners, and 1st Platoon kept working through the buildings where the enemy assault had staged. That afternoon, Doyle ordered the clearing of the dam's eastern half, 15 stories and more than 100 offices, a task that took 2 full Ranger squads roughly 2 hours, using the same grinding, door-by-door method as before. The fight was far from over. At dawn, the Iraqis attacked both flanks of the dam with squad-sized elements of 10 to 12 men. The Rangers turned back the assault, but as the morning wore on, indirect fire intensified, mortar rounds and 152mm artillery shells crashing onto the concrete near Ranger positions. Close air support became essential. An A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft answered the call throughout the day, striking enemy positions around the dam. That night, enemy fighters closed to within 200 meters of 2nd Platoon's position, pinning the Rangers down with rocket-propelled grenades from an angle that made it impossible to return effective fire. Air support again turned the tide. An A-10 dropped a 2,000-pound bomb just 300 meters from the platoon's position, wiping out the attackers and shattering every window in the dam complex from the shockwave. By the 3rd of April, the mortar attacks had thinned to roughly 1 round every 2 hours, but they were replaced by heavier 152mm artillery fire from the southwest. Most rounds fell harmlessly into the lake, but every platoon had shells land within a kilometer of its position, and 1 round struck the concrete rail just 75 meters from Captain Doyle's own command post without exploding. The Rangers were not so fortunate everywhere. Another artillery round detonated directly on a Ranger mortar position, and the resulting fragment struck Specialist Jeremy Feldbush in the face, penetrating his right orbital area. When the platoon sergeant reached him with medics, Feldbush was not breathing and his face had turned blue. Working fast, the medics cleared his airway, and he began breathing on his own again, his color returning as hope for his survival grew. They bandaged him, loaded him onto a vehicle, and drove him back through continuing artillery fire to the center of the dam, where he could wait for evacuation. Word reached the Tactical Operations Center at H1 quickly. In less than 40 minutes, a flight of 3 helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, an MH-47E Chinook and 2 MH-60L Blackhawks launched in broad daylight, and reached the dam less than an hour after Feldbush was hit. The Chinook evacuated Feldbush during a lull in the artillery barrage, and medical personnel began working on him the moment he was aboard, continuing his care once he reached a forward surgical team at H1. Feldbush would later receive a Purple Heart for his wounds and a Bronze Star for valor. That artillery strike marked something of a turning point. In the days that followed, mortar and artillery fire tapered off steadily. On the 6th of April, a tank element arrived to reinforce the position, and cooperation from local clerics helped stabilize Ranger control over the dam and the surrounding area. The Rangers secured the Anti-Aircraft Artillery Academy to the south, and cleared out its stockpile of munitions. By the end of the week, with enemy combatants either captured or scattered, the fight was effectively over. and the Rangers turned from combat to helping a newly arrived civil affairs team begin rehabilitating the facility. What those Rangers accomplished at Haditha Dam rarely gets the attention given to the armored drive on Baghdad, but its consequences were just as real. Had the dam been breached, the resulting flood would have impeded the 3rd Infantry Division's advance through the Karbala Pass and devastated farmland and communities across the Euphrates floodplain. Instead, a single Ranger company, reinforced by a platoon, supported by Little Birds and A-10s, and backed by the rapid response aviation of the 160th, held a 6-mile dam complex through days of infantry attacks and indirect fire. They cleared more than 20 stories of offices by hand, took an artillery round on a concrete rail just 75 meters from the company command post, a dud, and evacuated wounded prisoners under fire. By the 6th of April, a tank element had arrived, local clerics were cooperating, and enemy attacks had tapered off. The reservoir remained secure. The advance toward Baghdad continued, and a battle fought far from the cameras ended with the Rangers still holding the dam.